and then I want you to tell me what this means. These are the National Sexuality Education Standards. They were published in 2012, fall of 2012, right about the time Common Core, English and math were just beginning to be ginned up in this state and in most states. So they actually, in some regard, precede Common Core a little bit, even though they're both being written at the same time. Now you tell me what the words on the page mean, because people get so, the people who support Common Core, the ones that never come to this talk, this really aggravates them. So I'm going to be very careful in how I explain this. Tell me what those words mean. If they're the national sexuality standards, who owns them? Right? And if they're standards, that means they're going to have to be what? Tested. Tell me what the subtitle means. This is core content. I realize the word common doesn't appear there, but it's core content. And the skills they're going to start teaching your kids when? Kindergarten. Do you teach your 5-year-olds about sex? Because they're doing it now. And even if you want to argue this has absolutely nothing to do with Common Core, you better pay close attention to this. I'm going to try to dispel that notion that it has nothing to do with Common Core. Because if you open up to the 6th page of this document, you get the following. Page 6. When the national sexuality standards were constructed and put together, they consulted other things about how to do them. And look at the last one on the list. The national sexuality education standards were further informed by the work of the Common Core state standards for English language arts and mathematics. Why in the world does the national sex standards have to confer with and be informed by Common Core English? Explain it to me. If this is insanity, it has nothing to do with Common Core, I'm willing to admit it, but you're going to have to show me how. And the thing that's really shocking about this is the national sexuality standards were never meant to be rolled out as an individual curriculum, like English and math, and then science and history, that you could say as a state, oh, we'll take English and math. How many states would accept this, do you think? If this was rolled out that way, maybe California, how many states would actually accept it? And so, okay, how does this curriculum get into your schools then? The intent all along has been to fold it into every existing subject area. Remember that question I left hanging about 20 minutes ago? Why, Sandy said, and she answered it too. Why, the same way? Why is there so much graphic violence and sex? Why is there so much developmentally inappropriate sex in our kids' books? Well, this is why. Because the sexuality, I've read the whole 40-page document. There is nothing in it that calls for a separate class or a separate subject in which kids get taught this. They're going to have to be taught it as a codicil to every other subject area. It becomes part of the whole curriculum. We've had some really odd developmentally inappropriate math. It's not the math. You see what the math is. It's goofy and confusing. That's not the worst part of it. The worst part of it is some of the ways they ask questions in math. Some of the story problem examples about that one famous one from a Wisconsin school about rich people being greedy. How many greedy rich people, right? Look at the way they structure questions like that. And the thing about this is, if you just type in goofy Common Core math, you're going to get thousands of examples of this from all over the country. Very politicized, highly charged questions. Why? You tell me what it means. Please keep in mind that I have made no assertion yet, but I'll tell you what I think. I think you can say this is Common Core, and I think you can say it might be. But I think the one thing you cannot say is it's not. The one thing you cannot in good faith say is it's not. Because the only place to teach this is Common Core. There's no other place to teach it. There's no special course or class. It's not reserved to biology class or sex ed. It's not. It's part of the whole thing. And so what do they do in this document? They break your kids up into 3-year cycles, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. Then test 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. So by the time your kid's 7, they're going to have to master or know or be able to repeat certain information to be able to pass the standard and move on. I'm going to show you direct quotes from this document. Now, I'm going to tell you right up front. Maybe this is extreme of me. I don't think it's the federal government. I don't think public schools should be teaching sex to kids. I don't believe that. But people of good conscience can disagree. You can say, no, Dr. Pesta, I think it's important for schools to be teaching sperm and egg, or I think it's important for schools to be teaching condoms and birth control to protect our kids. You could make that argument. I wouldn't argue with you. I know what I think. But you're going to see in these standards, this has nothing to do with any of this. None of that is here. This is not biology. It's not birth control. It's pure, 100% unadulterated sociology. You don't teach your 5 and 6-year-olds about sex Because on some level you recognize, don't you, that you can't teach a kid about sex at age 5. All you can do is prick something on his brain. You can't get him to think about it. Here are some of the standards taken directly from the document. By the time your daughter's 7, she will be able to identify different kinds of family structures and demonstrate ways to show respect for different types of families. Now that strikes me as awfully sociological, and I want my kids to be respectful. I do that all the time. But it does beg the question, who gets to define what respect is? Who gets to define that? You don't teach your 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds about homosexuality, and I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm utterly agnostic about the issue. I've got many gay friends who don't care about it. But I'm going to tell you that I think it's your job, not the federal government, to determine your kids' attitudes towards things. And what if you're a devout Christian or Orthodox Jew or little Muslim kid, and you're 5, 6, and 7, and you're going to be processed this way? How does a 5-year-old come to grips with this? How does a 5-year-old come? You're not, as many people have said, you're not teaching 5-year-olds. If you're doing this to them, you're forcing things into their head. How about this? By the time your daughter's 7, she will describe differences and similarities in how boys and girls may be expected to act. And she will provide examples of how family, friends, media, society, and culture influence ways boys and girls think they should act. And you know, right? If in math, if right numbers aren't even true or false, then gender is an illusion, biology is an illusion. You're teaching kids here that gender is a construct. What else is it? And again, what does any of this have to do with sex education? There's no talk here about body parts or about condoms on cucumbers. This is pure sociological indoctrination. And why is it their business and their prerogative? And here's another one for you. If this is a standard that's going to be tested nationally, and you just saw the title of the document, what's going to happen if you teach your kids something different? What's going to happen then? If they say one thing, and that's the national standard, and you differ from that, what happens then? And, oh, come on, and are you going to put your 2-year-old, your 7-year-old in a position where she's going to have to become a creature of conscience and deny them? How do you get all this through the head of a 6 or a 7-year-old? How about this? By the time your child's 10, by the time your son is 10, he will, that's the standard, he will define sexual orientation as the romantic attraction of an individual to someone of the same gender or someone of a different gender. You can't argue with that. That's how you're going to define it. Moral, ethical, obligate, religious scruples aside, that's how you're going to define it. What gives them the right to tell you? You see what's happening here? Milgram, Safi, what everyone's been telling you. If you ask me, and I'll give the game away right now. If you ask me what the primary purpose of Common Core is, I do not believe it's ABCs and 1, 2, 3. I think it's a sociological experiment to take your kids and make them dependent on the state more than you. Why can't you moms and dads help your kids with the homework? It's not complicated, man. Because they won't let you do it any other way but than the way the textbooks do it. Everything about this curriculum, the radical sex, the sex at the various levels of high school, the political. You remember that famous assignment from a Wisconsin school? I think it was a 5th grade class, was sent home. I told her to write an essay. Why is the state just like the family? Remember that one from Wisconsin school? Right? If you look at the way the textbooks are set up and you look at the way the pedagogy works, a key aspect of it, and this is included, seems to be making the school more responsible for the parental rights of the kids and the parents. Do you know in Indiana, you've had your first warrantless home searches based on teacher recommendations? Because under Common Core, under the Affordable Care Act, if a teacher or a school administrator reports suspected anything to a federal agent, because of the Obamacare rules that nobody read, in the name of the child's health, the state can now enter a house without a warrant. That happened twice in Indiana already. One of the reasons, why do you think Indiana pulled out? All right, one of the main reasons. All right, even worse than some of the standards themselves are the way they plan to administrate them to your kids. And these are taken directly from the document. Instruction by qualified sexuality education teachers is essential for student achievement. And they're not going to create a sex ed class, which means your teachers are going to have to eventually be trained to incorporate sex into things like math and English and history. There are some state colleges, not in this state, that as far as I know, in this state, that are already beginning to add modules to their graduating high school and college teachers, teaching them how to begin to use math as a tool to instruct some of this stuff. How about this one? The students need opportunities to engage in cooperative and active learning strategies with regards to the standards. How about this? Sufficient time must be allocated for students to practice skills relating to sexuality education. How about this one? Students need multiple opportunities and a variety of assessment strategies to determine their achievement of the sexuality education standards of performance. How are they going to do that in one? You know, we don't have biology class for 5-year-olds. 6-year-olds do not attend sex education classes. To get a 5 and a 6 and a 7-year-old to these standards, you're going to have to make it a part of everything they read and say. Aren't you? Am I wrong about that? Do you think they wrote this not to use it with Common Core? In fact, given that Common Core is rapidly becoming the educational paradigm of the land, how else in the world would they teach it to your kids if not through Common Core? It does not make any sense. Now, I'm about to show you something that is graphic, so I apologize, but I think you need to see it. I would like to suggest to you that the education standards, I would like to...
Just if we have minors here, this might be a good time.
If
we have minors here, this would be a good time for them to step out.
FYI, if you've got little, I don't see any little ones. If you do...
high school or younger would be a good, good age to use.
Yeah. All right. This poster that I'm about to show you hangs on a wall in a middle school in Shawnee, Kansas. It's at the front of the classroom above the blackboard, right next to a picture of Clifford the Big Red Dog. This poster has been there all semester starting in fall of last year. The only way anybody found out about it is because a sixth grade girl who was in that class took a picture of it and brought it home to Dad. The poster's pretty graphic, so I'm going to show it to you now and we'll talk about it. This is the poster. How do people express their sexual feelings? And note, you've got, to me this is a perfect microcosm of Common Core because they're not terribly worried about things like proofreading because talking's on there twice. But look at the poster. This is how people express their sexual feelings. Talking is sexual, twice. Dancing is sexual. Cuddling on the couch is sexual. Caressing is sexual. And with all those other things on the board. Now, that's not just there for when they talk about health. It's there 8 hours a day, all day. It sits there. You know what's interesting about this? Is that for a public school system obsessed with birth control to the point of fetishization, do you notice how there's no mention here that some of these things might be more dangerous than others? Or some of them might induce pregnancy or disease? Dude, this is the sociology everybody's been telling you about. The purpose of this poster is to convince kids that they're all the same thing. And that if you object to any one of them, you object to all of them. And that if you accept any one of them, you must accept them all. What in a middle school classroom? And even worse than the poster is the explanation Dad got from the school, and that's this. So Dad got all upset, and Hocker Grove Middle School spokeswoman Leanne Neal wrote the following. The poster that you reference is actually part of our middle school health and science materials, and so it is a part of our district-approved curriculum. Where did it come from? The National Sexuality Standards. The curriculum is a part of, aligned with the national standards around those topics, and so it's a part of our school curriculum. And that's the Bible, though. That's Shawnee, Kansas. That's not hippy-dippy Madison or Berkeley, California. This is remarkable when you stop and think about it. But I think it gives you a really good sense of the sociological nature of the so-called sex education that is envisioned to your schools. In the interest of full disclosure, and I urge you to read it, on April 13th of this year, the Journal Sentinel did a big front-page profile piece on me. I spent 6 hours talking to their reporter. I gave her all these links. We went over this. I showed her where I got all my information. She included none of it. In fact, and you can read the article for yourself, she didn't, nowhere in the article does she let me explain what I think Common Core is. She takes snippets of what I saw, and she lets the DPI guy just hammer me. And I'm doing this because this is Wisconsin, and I'd like to show you something. The thing that the DPI guy got really angry about, this is him, John Johnson, the Director of Education Information, the Education Information guy at the DPI. He got really mad that I talked about these standards, even though he'd never seen my talk. And one of the great ironies of this, that reporter, 3 days before the talk, 3 days before she printed that article, she came to a 3-hour talk on Common Core I gave in Cedar Grove. There were 150 people present in the room, including 4 legislators and 2 superintendents. She did not ask a single person who listened to my talk a question. The only people in the article who comment on my talk are people who never saw it. But this is the Journal Sentinel. I'm not surprised by it. But what I'd like to suggest, I'd like to demonstrate the dishonesty of the Journal Sentinel with regards to the section. And if you're in, and there's a bigger purpose rather than just to try to exonerate my sorry little self. There's a bigger reason. It's because if you're involved in education in the state, you have to come to grips with the dishonesty of the DPI. So he says this about what I just showed you. These standards were developed by health groups with no affiliation to Common Core. I just showed you the affiliation on page 6. There are no health, sex education standards in Common Core. Debatable, right? Depends on how loosely you interpret the term related. Further, a 2012 state law makes sex education, called human growth and development, a locally controlled decision. In other words, we will not bow to the national standards anyway. It's a locally controlled decision. He goes on to say, looking at the links, I don't know what links he means. None of these are relevant or related to what is legally allowed in Wisconsin. This is not Washington or California or wherever else Pesta is finding his sources, links, right? That's April 13th of this year. That was printed. Well, in July of last year, July of 2013, the DPI held a conference for teachers on how to implement the national sexuality standards in Wisconsin Common Core classrooms. It was held at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. July was the date. July 25th, 2013. We have the whole minutes for the meeting. It was a 60-page agenda. 40 of it was simply the complete reproduction of the national sexuality standards. And they held seminars on how to incorporate it into Wisconsin public schools. That's what happened last summer. You can find this document online easily. I'll send it to you. So you got the DPI guy about a month ago saying, legally we can't do this. Legally we're not tied to this. But then just the previous summer, the DPI is holding seminars on how to incorporate the stuff that I just showed you into Wisconsin classrooms. Make of that what you will. Okay? We're almost done. Last thing I need to show you. And I'm going to tell you, so please listen to me, this book predates Common Core. It's late 90s, 1998. It was written by Planned Parenthood. But remember what I've been telling you, Common Core is not new. Common Core is the extension of No Child Left Behind, which is the extension of Goal 2000, which is going back. Interestingly, and I've been in 30 states, in 13 of those states, people have shown me the newest versions of this book in their school library. 13 different people in 13 different states have showed me versions of it. The newest ones, published in the last year and a half, are all stamped Common Core approved, all of them. In the 13 states I've been to, I don't know about Wisconsin, this book teaches 4th graders how to masturbate. And so when you open the book, you see this, naked people. This is the pictorial version of the poster I just showed you. Remember what the purpose of that poster was? To convince kids that you can make, this is it, you make no moral and ethical distinctions whatsoever. Shame, chastity, modesty, Judeo-Christian values, none of those things apply here. These are all equally valid things. In fact, listen to what the title of the book was. It's perfectly normal. And so what do you get here? You get fat naked people, skinny naked people, short naked people, tall naked people, black naked people, white naked people, handicapped naked people, even, inexplicably, little baby naked people. Isn't that a violation of some child pornography? But notice what the implication of this is that it's all perfectly normal, just like on that poster. Every act on that poster, from the innocent to the vulgar, are the same act. And then they have absolutely graphic descriptions of children masturbating to teach kids how to do it. And I just thought I'd throw this in there for giggles. The version of this book that's in the Milwaukee Public Library, guess who donated it to the Milwaukee Public Library? The Journal Sentinel. Presented to the Milwaukee Public Library for the citizens of Milwaukee from your Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. There you go, right? But I'm believing that. Gotcha. All right. We're just about done. And I'm going to go back, hang on. Last thing. Not surprisingly, particularly in those states that have had it longer, particularly in those states where there has been testing, this has been absolutely developmentally traumatic for a lot of kids. If you remember the Wisconsin hearings, we brought Gary Thompson here. Gary Thompson is a clinical child psychologist. You can watch his testimony. African-American, father of 5. Gary has one special needs child and one extremely gifted child. And in his words, before the committee, both of them are getting royally screwed over by Common Core. That there is no place for his daughter, his excelling daughter, and the one that's falling behind. He gave a moving testimony in Wisconsin about what was happening with Common Core across the country. We have a document with over 200 such developmental and clinical psychologists, all tested from all different political walks of life, begging the states to get out of this. It is child abuse, they say. I want to show you just one of these, This is from the state of New York. This is Dr. Mary Calamia testifying before the Senate Select Committee on Common Core about what she's seen over the last 2 years in her own practice. Right? This is one of the reasons why a state that's already seen 2 years of testing, a very liberal state like New York, is really scrambling to get out of it. This is Dr. Mary.
Good afternoon. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a psychotherapist. I work with parents, children, and about half of my caseload is teachers also. My caseload represents about 20 different school districts in Suffolk County. In the fall of 2012, my phone started ringing. I started getting an inordinate number of referrals of students, a lot of honors students, 8th graders mostly, who were self-mutilating. They were cutting themselves with sharp objects, and they were burning themselves with cigarettes. My phone never stopped. And I didn't know why. I asked the kids, and all they kept saying was, "We can't take the pressure, it's too much." I also started getting a lot of elementary school students referred to me. They were refusing to go to school. They said they felt stupid and that school was too hard. They were throwing tantrums, begging to stay home, and upset to the point of vomiting. I was hearing from parents about kids bringing home homework they couldn't help them with. I was alarmed to hear that in some cases there were no textbooks for the parents to look at, and they had no idea what their children were learning. The teachers were reporting a staggering level of anxiety and depression, and that was when I first heard the term Common Core, and learned about the standards that we now say set the bar so high anyone can walk right under it. Everyone was talking about the tests. As the school year progressed and the tests loomed, my patients were increasing their self-mutilating behaviors. They were complaining of insomnia, panic attacks, loss of appetite, depressed mood, and in one case, suicidal thoughts that resulted in a 2-week hospital stay for an adolescent. We can't regulate biology. Young children cannot engage in the type of critical thinking that the Common Core calls for. That would require a fully developed prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that is not fully functional until adulthood. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for critical thinking, rational decision-making, and abstract thought, all things that the Common Core requires prematurely. We give children pre-assessments, tell them to succeed, and then give them tests on material they haven't learned and tell them it's okay to fail. They cannot resolve that mixed message. Last spring, a 6-year-old encountered a multiplication sign on the NWEA first grade math exam and asked the teacher what it was. The teacher was not allowed to help him and told him to just do his best. From that point on, the student's test performance went downhill. He couldn't shake off the unfamiliar symbol and couldn't believe his teacher wouldn't help him. The Common Core requires children to read informational texts that are owned by a handful of corporations. They don't have a filter to distinguish good information from bad. So whatever you put in front of them, they take that as gospel. They're literal. So when we give them a textbook that explains the Second Amendment as the people have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia, they will look no further for clarification. We ask them to write critically using emotionally charged language to persuade instead of inform. They don't have that functional prefrontal cortex, so they tap into their limbic system, which is the part of the brain that involves basic human emotions, anger and fear being the foremost. So when we ask them to use emotionally charged language, we're actually asking them to fuel their language with fear and anger and aggression. They cannot temper this judgment. They don't have the ability to do that. So we teach to the test, which I think doesn't really measure learning. I think the tests measure endurance and resilience. Only a child who can sit still for 90 minutes, come back the next day and do it again, and the next day again, can succeed. I'm going to introduce you to a couple, I'm almost done. I'm going to introduce you to just a couple of student stories, okay? A couple of the phases of the Common Core. We have an entire 3rd grade class that spent the entire day sobbing after one testing session. A 2nd grader who witnessed this is now in 3rd grade and won't go to school. She's being evaluated, a 7-year-old being evaluated with psychotropic medication just to get her to go to school. A 6-year-old who came home crying because in September, in the 1st grade, she didn't know what a vertex was. 2 8-year-olds opted out of the ELA exam and were publicly denied cookies because the teacher gave them to the class but wouldn't give them to them. And that teacher who, under duress, felt obligated to do such a thing. A sixth grader who once aspired to be a writer but now won't do it because we do it all day long, even in math. And a mother who has to leave work early because her son is hysterical over his math homework, and his CPA grandfather who's babysitting for him can't even help him do it. And countless other kids who are refusing to go to school, feel stupid, and now are completely turned off to education. I will conclude with this one thought. Our country became a superpower on the backs of men and women who learned in one-room schoolhouses. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a great deal of technology or corporate or government involvement to help our children to succeed. We need to rethink the Common Core and the associated high-stakes testing and get back to the business of educating our children in a safe, healthy, and productive manner. Thank you.
Alright, there is the website I told you about. Again, there is no commitment, there is no obligation, no one's going to ask you for money. You go to that free of charge, you click on the Common Core link, you can watch all those videos I told you about, you can get most of this information. Some of the more recent things I have not updated yet, so if you can't get them there, email me and I'll get them into your hands. Remember what I told you. I'm going to make a few quick comments and I'll take any questions you have. Common Core is such a comprehensive thing that there must be something in it that's better than what we have. There must be. Nothing can be that big and not have something in it that might be better than the way we do things now. But I ask you, is it worth the potential problems? Why the rush to implement? Why the rush to hook everybody up with testing? One of the things we tried to suggest to some of the legislators, try to get them to adopt the following. Why not put a 3-year moratorium on linking up Wisconsin kids with the national tests? This way, you can have Common Core in your schools. You can continue to teach it, but we don't do the national test for a couple of years to see how it works, to see if it does work. Superintendent Evers said, if you do that, I'm going to sue the state. Why? Explain to me a reason why in the name of our kids. You go ahead and teach them your curriculum. Besides, in 3 years, wouldn't our Wisconsin teachers have a better handle on it? Better able to teach it? So why the absolute insistence that we will not opt out of the testing even for a year? It is an inconsistent, other than the money that comes with those tests, there is no consistent reason for it. And now, after about 1 year, of the 46 states that took Common Core, 28 are now struggling to get out of it. And I don't include Wisconsin in that list. 28 states are struggling to get out of it. There are over 300 pieces of legislation sitting in 40 different state houses at various degrees of moving forward to either kill Common Core entirely or to completely rewrite it. Indiana has pulled out. Missouri and Oklahoma are about to go in the next couple of weeks. South Carolina will follow shortly thereafter. I don't know when. I don't know what the number is. 4 states, 6 states, 8 states, 12 states. I don't know how many states it will take to pull out before the federal government loses all power to punish them. I don't know. But at some point they're going to reach that, where they can't in good conscience deny 6 or 8 or 12 states federal money simply because they want out of the standard. So what I'm saying to you is that this is a complicated issue. If you can get people who know it and support it to talk, I beg you to go listen respectfully. I also want to say this by way of closing. 95% of the information I gave you, 95% of it comes from somebody not named Pesta. It's all up there. You can have it. You go listen to what they say. You go figure it out for yourself. It's not about me. You go do it. If you have any questions about what I showed you, I'll tell you where I got it from. But once you do that, and then you can be reasonably sure that there are serious people with serious credentials who seriously oppose them, you are entitled to say to the people who support it, now you show me. This is your kids. Right? This is a big deal. And I'll say this by closing. One of the reasons we're in this boat is for the last 30 or 40 years of outcome-based education, we have abandoned our kids to the schools. If moms and dads had been more actively involved and more willing to be involved, if moms and dads went to school, don't blame your school people for this exclusively. If our moms and dads had been more willing to go to school board meetings and willing to get input on what's going on, then this certainly couldn't have happened the way that it did. The good thing about Common Core, it seems to me, the redeeming thing about it, is moms and dads are doing it. And that's good. You have to decide as a state what you want to have for your kids. It seems to me that moms and dads need to be on the front line of determining how their kids learn. And you guys were the ones who were most inclusively left out of that. In fact, you were the only ones. There were some teachers involved. You were the only ones, moms and dads, who were entirely left out of it. And maybe that's because they didn't bother to ask you because for 30, 40 years you didn't pay much attention. Regardless, you were left out of it. You gotta rise up and take it back. Do it civilly, do it loudly, do it civilly. Thank you for listening, and I'll